Hi, my name is Ellie Sutton.
And I'm Lillian Clark. Today we're going to be talking about interrogating the language gap of young bilingual and bidialectal students by Ofelia Garcia and Ricardo Othegui.
Perfect. And we're going to start off with the summary portion. So this article talked a lot about the language gap and how it is an unfair way of separating people, and especially students. And rather than it being a way to, I'm guessing like the overall sense of way to just identify students in the areas in which improvements needs to be made, this term and the notion of it has actually been turned into a negative separation, which occurs. And this article talked about how it even could be said as a racist notion. And so that's something that we've also talked a lot about in this class of just like of the term racism and stuff, which is what we and wait racist notions, which we kind of established more as deficit thinking. But this article goes on to say that it's basically different names for the same problem. So there's genetic inferiority, there's cultural deprivation, and eventually was language gaps. And so it's all different things that are meant to be more, I guess, politically correct, but it's still meaning the same thing. And actually, what this article is trying to do is show that it still has that same detrimental effect to the students when they're labeled as that.
Mhm.
Um, so this article also talks about translanguaging and how this can be a blessing for students and shouldn't be viewed as limiting or inferior as well, but they should be able to have that right to have their culture and the other knowledge of the other languages to really help them learn and to grow. And there are many different ways in which these English language learners can use translanguaging in the classroom, but also many other ways that they can just really use their culture to the best of their abilities. And that would be such as gesture or music and dance. And these are ways of learning and expression that aren't always incorporated in just native English speaking their counterparts. But for ELLs, this is something that helps them make a lot more connections and really helps them understand the different new information that they're gaining and learning. This article also talked about the drum analogy, where native English speakers are asked, everyone's asked to play drums, right? And the native English speakers, they are asked to play and they're given two sticks, while English language learners are forced to play with one hand tied behind their back. And it just shows the struggles of learning without the right tools that they need, right? And so kind of what I talked about earlier, the right tools would be gesture, music, and dance. But if they're not given those things or not allowed those opportunities to use them, such as the hand tied behind their back, then they might definitely would probably struggle a lot more.
Mhm. Yeah. I really like what you're saying and how, like, I guess the language gap is a deficit way of thinking because it focuses on what the students can't do instead of what they are able to do. Like you're saying, they have so many like cultural and just diverse amounts of skills. It could be a different language, but like you're saying, the music and the dance and the different ways and that they communicate and talk to each other and can, I guess, express themselves in different ways, which is really, really valuable. But oftentimes we don't recognize those skills and abilities as skills and abilities, and we kind of say that you have to fit a specific mold in order to be successful, which um, yeah, it's just really, really hard and a deficit way of thinking because it puts them behind instead of valuing what they really can contribute to our classroom and also to like our community as a whole. Um, and a lot of this article talked about, I guess, the history of the education system and how we have been treating our multilingual students. And it talks about how when segregation ended and kind of all of the acts came into play that stopped discrimination based off of race. A lot of people started replacing, the word race with language and saying like,
Hmm.
speak the majority language, then you're other or need to be separated or, yeah. And so it's a one way that we really separate those minorities is by um, defining their weaknesses according to the majority language, um, which is really just not fair. But it also talks about translanguaging and how we can combat this idea by recognizing the student as a person and everything that they're able to do instead of drawing those lines that society has between languages and between ways of communication, focusing on the student and the way that they can express themselves and think through problems.
I love that. Okay, we will now talk about the praxis portion. And one thing that I want to do is just enforce the idea that every language is welcomed in the classroom. And that's something that can be whether they're writing their personal essays or they're doing projects or they're picking different books to read from or different books to do their book report on. I just want them to know that they really can use their whatever language that they may be learning or that may already have. Um, and I think also I really want to try to incorporate a positive viewpoint for all students. A lot of students will come from backgrounds or houses where they've already heard a bunch of racist jokes or things like that. And so if we kind of just establish that culture in the classroom of positivity and acceptance and love and welcoming just every culture and language, then I think that can really, it's a small drop in the ocean, but it can really help. Um, as well as what I talked about earlier, just the gesture and music and dance, and the multimodal meaning making. And I just think that's just such an important to incorporate throughout the day. And they can be such simple, easy ways. We've actually learned a lot about that, and I've learned about that in my music class, music for elementary class. But it's just something that, like, if it's something that'll help even one student, why not incorporate it if it will also benefit a lot of other students? So that's what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I really like that. And I also want to make sure that all of my students are, I guess, celebrated in the classroom. I want everyone to know that they are welcome and not only like there to learn, but also there to contribute, I guess. And so I just want to make sure that their skills and the things that they know how to do already, like those funds of knowledge, are celebrated and they're given the opportunity to use that in the classroom. Um, yeah, and I also want every student, regardless of their background or, testing scores, to know that I, as their teacher, see them as, I guess, intelligent and smart and capable, because I think that goes a long way in helping them to believe that about themselves also, and to, I guess, kind of disprove these racialized and negative deficit perspectives that lots of people have.
Yeah, I really like that. Um, we will now talk about the reflection portion. And overall, I really like this article. I feel like I've learned a lot about this, a lot of what they talked about in our 12-440 class, but I think it's also always really important to have opportunities to check your biases and ask yourself how you're viewing other people and especially your students. And just have these reminders of how we can best help our students and in what ways and what they're really going through because if we don't have those perspectives, sometimes it's hard for us to imagine it or to understand where they are coming from. But when we hear these real life experiences, it can help us just kind of get a grasp on what they're feeling as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also really liked this article. I think it discussed very thoroughly the history of, I guess, the United States and the way that we as a country have viewed multilingual speakers. And yeah, and I think that's just helpful to know and have that background information so that we can self-reflect on, why do I think the way that I do? Or what things have I heard about this that have, I guess, influenced the way that I see my students and think about this issue. Yeah, so I think this article was really helpful in self-reflection and thinking about how we can improve and maybe where our, like you said, our biases might be, I guess, inaccurate and not contributing or helpful, so that we can change that thing and improve as teachers and also as a country, I think is important.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.